People everywhere are getting hit from every direction, battered by runaway climate change and squeezed by a cost of living crisis. Geopolitical divisions are triggering new conflicts and making old ones even more difficult to resolve. The G20 is ground zero for bridging divisions and finding answers to this crisis and more. First, climate, the defining challenge of our age. I've just come from the COP27 summit in Sharm el-Sheikh. The goal of limiting global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees is slipping away. We are dangerously close to tipping points at which climate chaos could become irreversible. Science tells us that global heating beyond that limit poses an existential threat to all life on Earth. But global emissions and temperatures continue to rise. I tend to agree that insanity consists in doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. It is obvious we need a new approach. And so I have proposed a historic pact between developed and emerging economies, a climate solidarity pact that combines the capacities and resources of developed and emerging economies for the benefit of all. G20 countries are responsible for 80% of global emissions. G20 leaders can make or break the climate solidarity pact that I intend to present again tomorrow. Under this pact, they would make extra efforts this decade to keep the limit of 1.5 degrees alive. And wealthier countries and international financial institutions would provide financial and technical assistance to help the emerging economies accelerate their renewable energy transition. The Climate Solidarity Pact can save lives, livelihoods, and our planet. It can help end dependence on fossil fuels while providing universal, affordable, sustainable energy for all. Second, the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. The SDGs are issuing an SOS. Developing countries cannot access the finance they need to reduce poverty and hunger and invest in sustainable development. I therefore urge G20 economies to adopt an SDG stimulus package that will provide governments of the global south with investments and liquidity and offer debt relief and restructuring. This will enable emerging economies to invest in healthcare, education, gender equality and renewable energy, to invest in their people and rescue the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The SDG stimulus is a minimal and necessary step to ease the food and energy crisis and prevent further suffering and hardship down the line. G20 countries are the world's most powerful economies, with a majority on the boards of multilateral development banks, and so they can and must make it happen. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, my interventions at this summit will also focus on the food and energy crisis and on the digital transformation of our economies and societies. My message on food is that we need urgent action to prevent famine and hunger in a growing number of places around the world. The Black Sea Grain Initiative and efforts to ensure Russian food and fertilizers can flow to global markets are essential to global food security. The Black Sea Grain Initiative has already helped to stabilize markets and bring food prices down. Every fraction of a percent eases hunger and saves lives. Meanwhile, we must do more to ease the global fertilizer crunch. Fertilizer prices are up to 3 times higher than before the pandemic, and we are working to end all obstacles to the free flow of Russian food and fertilizers to global markets. Our engagement with the European Union, the United States and the United Kingdom has helped remove many of the impediments to market access. These products are not subject to sanctions, but suffer indirect impacts. And so we are working non-stop to resolve all remaining issues, chiefly around payments, and to renew the Black Sea Grain Initiative. On energy, The war in Ukraine has clearly demonstrated the dangers of our addiction to fossil fuels. It is the best possible argument for the fastest possible transition to renewable energy. And on digital transformation, the world is looking for leadership. Powerful tech companies are running roughshod over human rights and personal privacy and providing platforms for deadly disinformation in pursuit of profits. Let's be clear, disinformation kills, undermining public health kills, and these are life and death issues. We urgently need global guardrails on technology. I will suggest a way forward based on a global digital compact for an open, free, secure and inclusive internet. A compact to deliver on universal connectivity, on a human-central digital space that protects free speech and privacy, and on the safe and responsible use of data. And I'm also calling for a global code of conduct that promotes integrity in public communications and promotes information literacy. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, today, as we welcome the 8 billionth member of our growing human family, we must think ahead. By 2050, the world's population will be approaching 10 billion. Action or inaction by the G20 will determine whether every member of our human family has a chance to live sustainably and peacefully on a healthy planet. And thank you for your attention, and I'm at your disposal to answer a few questions.
Thank you. Please state your name and the outlet you work for. James?
James Bays from Al Jazeera. You mentioned the Black Sea Grain Initiative, Secretary General. It needs to be renewed in just 4 days' time. Are you hopeful, and will you be discussing it here with the delegations from Russia, Ukraine and Turkey? And on wider diplomacy on the war, there are reports of talks taking place between the US and Russia in Ankara. Can you tell us more? Is the UN involved?
In relation to the second question, the UN is not involved. I think it's very positive that the US and Russia have talks because that is an extremely relevant development in relation to the future, but we are not involved. And in relation to the first questions, we had on Friday a very important meeting between our delegation and the delegation of the Russian Federation. There were also contacts this weekend with the Ukrainian side. I myself will be talking to Kyiv in a few moments, and I will be meeting hopefully both delegations here in this summit. There was a lot of progress in removing the obstacles to Russian export of food and fertilizers, and I'm hopeful that our efforts will go on being successful and will be able to remove the last obstacles. And I'm hopeful that the Black Sea Grain Initiative will be renewed because both things are extremely important for today's world.
Yes, please.
Piano Magbitang from ABS-CBN Climate Tracker from Manila. There were fears that G20 leaders are backtracking.
Can you speak up a little, please?
Sorry. There were fears that G20 leaders are backtracking on their climate pledges. But how will the UN push global leaders to double down on their 1.5 degrees target from the Rome text?
Sorry, I didn't understand. Well, it is extremely important that in this COP, the questions related to climate finance be positively settled. And that means that there is a clarification of how the $100 billion of support to developing economies will be established. Also, a roadmap for the commitment that was made to double the financing to adaptation. And I'm deeply convinced that a central question for the success of this COP is an important step forward in relation to loss and damage, which means not only the recognition of loss and damage, but a roadmap to address the problem, including through the establishment of a mechanism to manage the financial aspects of the loss and damage. I was encouraged by some declarations of some countries willing to contribute to a fund, but it's still early to know whether this objective will be or not reached. In relation to the necessary ambition in reduction of emissions, I would say that the countries around the table in this G20 are the ones that matter, because they represent 80% of the emissions. And so I will be tomorrow making a very strong appeal for them to join efforts in order to make sure that combining those resources and combining those technology capacities, they will be able to have a common plan to reach net zero globally in 2050. I am convinced that we need to break the dramatic geopolitical divides. And as I said in the COP27, there is no way in which we can address the climate challenge that we face without the cooperation of all G20 members, and in particular, without the cooperation of the two biggest economies, the United States and China. And I'm happy that the two countries had a summit today.
Okay, in the back over there, please.
Hi, I'm Eno from National Radio of Indonesia. My question is about the presidency of Indonesia in this year. Excellency, do you have in mind about it? And also, what aspect that could be nurtured for the next presidency? Thank you.
I have to say that I'm a great admirer of what Indonesia has been doing, and in particular of the action of President Widodo. I think in a very difficult context in which the geopolitical divides have reached the climax, Indonesia has demonstrated an enormous capacity to bring parties together, to promote dialogue, and to try to push for solutions. I am also very happy that Indonesia will be assuming the presidency of ASEAN in the next year and leading the solution of the dramatic situation in Myanmar. And on the other hand, I would like to say that the Indonesian president initiates 4 presidencies of the G20 of the Global South: Indonesia, India, Brazil, and South Africa. And I believe that this is a golden opportunity to finally address seriously what it is, a global financial and economic system that is deeply unjust and that has promoted enormous inequalities, especially in the uneven distribution of resources after COVID and in the capacity to respond effectively to the impacts of climate change in developing economies. And so I'm very hopeful that following the lead of Indonesia, India, Brazil and South Africa will be able to really make a clear breakthrough in the necessary reform of what I've called several times a morally bankrupt international financial system.
Okay, we're going to take one last question over here. Sorry.
I mean, we can have both.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. So 2 questions, if you don't mind. First, my name is Dmitry Melnikov, Russian National TV. My first question is, how can you comment on Vladimir Putin's decision not to take part in this summit?
On?
Vladimir Putin's decision not to attend Bali summit. And my second question about Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov. There was some news that he had some heart problems today. He was taken to hospital. You have meeting scheduled for tomorrow. Do you know anything about it? Thank you.
First of all, I would like very much to have President Putin here, and the meeting I'm having with Lavrov, of course, would be even more relevant if it would be with President Putin. And I did not know about what happened to Minister Lavrov. I wish him the best possible recovery and hope that tomorrow it will be possible to meet.
Okay, and last question over here, please.
Hello, Mr. Secretary General. My name is Camil Staschnoi. I work in TELAM, the national news agency of Argentina. As you say, we are in the middle of the energy and food crisis. I came from Latin America, so I want to ask you, what role do you think Latin America can play in providing food and energy to the world?
Well, I think Argentina has a very important food production and a very important contribution in that regard. And I believe that Latin America is seriously waking up for the need of development of massive renewable energy. And I know that Argentina is in that line. So obviously the contribution of Latin America is extremely, extremely important. On the other hand, I'd like to say that the problem of food energy is also a problem of finance. Even if you have food available, if there is no money to buy it, that doesn't solve the problem. If you have energy available, if there is no money to buy it. And so, as important as solving and addressing directly the food and energy crisis is indeed to provide countries, especially in the developing world, with the fiscal space that is needed to be able to support their populations in this dramatic situation, at the same time to speed their investment in adaptation and in the green transformation.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Secretary.
Okay. Thank you very much. Shukran. Merci. Spasiba. Gracias. Sorry?